This seems to be a pretty broad crypto crash. Pretty much everything is going down, but there is one major asset that's going down more than most. And that is Solana. Is this potentially a buying opportunity? Have a look at this. Everything is red. In the last 24 hours, Solana lost the most. In the last week, Solana lost the most. And it also lost the most in the last 3 months. And so when an asset sells off faster than the rest, but we do think there's a good likelihood that that asset might stay around long term, then maybe this is an opportunity. Have a look at this here. This is the Solana dominance chart. How much of all of crypto is currently in Solana, measured in market cap? The last 3 months were this decline in Solana dominance. We went from 3.3% to 2.3%. But we are in a sideways trading range that had been relatively stable over the last 2 years. And we are at the lower end of that trading range. We might even be close to a potential support right now. The risk of an additional underperformance of 5% versus the potential reward of an outperformance of 57%. Maybe that's worth it. Because while the total value locked, the TVL, the capital that's currently on the Solana chain, is rather fluctuating, so that is measured in US dollars, it doesn't look that bad when you measure it in Solana tokens themselves. Now, why might we want to measure the TVL in Solana? It's because a lot of the tokens on the Solana chain are directly bound to the Solana price. So Solana price is going up and down, but this chart over here shows how much decentralized finance on Solana is used over time, irrespective of the fluctuations of Solana itself. So if Solana's price wasn't fluctuating that much, we'd see a quite consistent adoption curve over the last 2 years. Again, while Solana dominance just went sideways over the same time period, at least relatively speaking. Let's have a look at a few more relative valuation charts. How is Solana doing relative to Bitcoin, for example, or relative to Ethereum? Solana and Ethereum are somewhat competing, right? They're both smart contract platforms. Let's start off with Bitcoin. So this is the Solana price relative to the Bitcoin price. The overarching trend is rather bearish. So Bitcoin tends to outperform Solana over the long term, at least since the end of 2021, after the initial adoption phase. And during a bear market, Solana tends to sell off more than BTC. During a bull market, Solana tends to outperform BTC. This rally over here, which returned almost 500% more performance than Bitcoin, was driven by the Pump.Fun ecosystem, so the Memecoin trading platform on the Solana chain. The Bitcoin dominance over the same time period went up, and there is a good chance that it will continue to go up. That being said, Solana does not necessarily directly compete with Bitcoin. It competes more with Ethereum because it's more of a risky play. It's also more of a technology play, a more speculative play. Here is Solana relative to Ethereum. Now here we do see higher highs across cycles. We also saw higher lows. Those are all parallel lines, right? So this is not just connecting the different data points. This is actually parallel. There's a case to be made that maybe if the overall bull market prevails, that Solana could outperform Ethereum by quite a bit from here. A potential rally of more than 140% versus ETH. And so the picture here starts to make sense, right? The puzzle pieces all come together. Ethereum, relatively speaking, should come down. And that's also where I bet my money. This is the Ethereum dominance. It bottomed out in April of last year at a very similar level to where we bottomed already in August of 2019. This arrow over here, that's the move from proof of work to proof of stake, called the merge. So a lot of anticipation towards that merge, and then once the news hit, that was a sell the news event. But the rally we see recently, right, since April of 2025, the more than 100% outperformance. That was due to the treasury company narrative. So Ethereum started to get adoption by the treasury companies. First we had this for Bitcoin, right? We had Michael Saylor that bought up Bitcoin. There was Tom Lee of Bitmine that bought up Ethereum. But it was a broader story than that, right? It was not just Tom Lee. But interestingly enough, if we exclude Bitmine from this chart, so the blue area over here, we can see how the purchases by the treasury companies have slowed down significantly. We haven't seen any new purchases since the beginning of September, and that's maybe one of the reasons why this rally didn't continue anymore since the beginning of September. There were even dedicated websites around that topic, for example, strategicethreserve.xyz, that has completely shut down simply because the numbers around Ethereum aren't that great. But this is not an Ethereum video, this is a Solana video. So a lot of the outperformance of SOL versus ETH might just be Ethereum coming down. But here's what I think is important for Solana. The volatility of Solana can be massive, right? This is a drop of 96%. Nobody keeps on holding an asset throughout such a drop, right? Everybody starts to sell at some point. Everybody got decimated. So really, we can't just buy and hold Solana. We don't really know how Solana will fare over the very long term. What we can do though is we can try to time the momentum. And so instead of getting exposed to a 96% decline, we can try to sell whenever momentum turns bearish, and we try to buy whenever momentum turns bullish. And we can do this using moving averages. What we see here in red, that's a moving average of Solana that I think is very useful. It's the 58-day simple moving average. It's a moving average that historically, according to my backtest, tended to work the best. There's also the 11-day moving average, but that causes a lot of trading fees. The 58-day tends to be the better medium-term option. So we sell Solana, or we bet on falling prices of Solana whenever we are below. We bet on rising prices whenever we are above. We do have our fake outs, which unfortunately aren't that great. So we buy high, to then sell low again, to buy then high again, to then sell low again. So really it's the trends that make the vast majority of the outperformance here. But since the trends are so massive, since within a few months we can go down by 55% over here, or 62% over here, or potentially here, another 58%. Since the movements are strong enough, all of those bad signals that we get in between, they don't really matter that much. And so that's why it's so important to be careful. The recent drop was quote unquote only 37%, but we are currently below that moving average. It's at $132 with the tendency to decline. How good is this moving average, right? If we bought and held during the time period, we would have gotten 131%. With the moving average, we almost double that annually by an annualized performance of close to 250%. So this is then how that looks like if we just sell whenever we are below, right? So our portfolio line just goes flat. We get spared from the massive bear market. And this is the performance if we also bet on falling prices. So that's of course slightly better than if we just go in cash. We can then add some optimized leverage, and then we get the real nice outperformance. This is a 10x with every horizontal line here. So the delta is not a 100x, but it's more than a 10x, maybe something like 50 to 60x versus buying and holding Solana. And so that's how I personally go about this. I do not think that just buying and holding in Solana makes a lot of sense, but I do think that Solana has a good chance to outperform Ethereum long term. It probably will not outperform Bitcoin. Bitcoin tends to outperform most altcoins most of the time. But it seems like we are very close to a support in Solana. Again, this dominance chart looks very attractive for a potential risk on bet. But before I enter that bet, I want us to be above the best moving average. I want us to partially revert the recent sell-off, and I'm okay to not buy the bottom perfectly, as long as the risk versus potential reward is high enough. I think it's good to wait until the support is properly confirmed. And I always prefer to use approaches that at least historically worked well. How well will they continue to work in the future? Of course, nobody knows, but I think it's a better approach to use statistics like this compared to just trading according to gut feeling. So let's see what the next few days bring. Even though the risk to reward looks nice, momentum is a powerful force as well. And if we do see a continued sell-off, those sell-offs can be very dramatic. And I don't want to be caught up in a potential continuation of the recent bearish trend. Things can become very, very brutal for Solana in the worst case. If you got some value out of this video, feel free to give this a like. It will help the channel grow. Feel free to also check out the premium membership. This is where you can co-invest in trend following strategies. So we've got a trend follower for Bitcoin. We've also got one for Ethereum. And we are going to open one for Solana in the next few months as well. See you next time on YouTube or see you on premium. Cheers.